Each week, we'll be sharing uplifting, spiritually focused wellness practices to best support you in regaining your personal power, or we'll have special guest interviews with the same intention. This show is in service to all those listening, and especially for folks of color who are seeking information to support their physical, mental, and emotional spiritual awakening. These practices will help you live your best life.
Yay, everybody. Thank you for coming back and watching the show. I have a really special guest, a really beautiful, special friend. You know, on this show, we really do try to create opportunities for people to connect with divine information. And a beautiful friend made their way into my life last year. I'm sitting with the lovely Govindi Janeja. Of course, when you go live, right? Janeja. And I met Govindi. I met her at a heart opening festival that was centered around workshops for healing, healing for people to have the ability to heal themselves through various modalities, connect with intimacy, connect with the heart center. And you and I just had an instant heart connection and have kept up our friendship and our connection. So I just want to say welcome to the show.
Thank you. What an honor. After meeting you out there, who would have guessed? I mean, my spirit felt like I knew this is a woman that you need to connect with, and something's going to happen between her and you. So, and something probably did happen too in terms of like some soul connection. So I'm glad we're continuing this.
Yes, I agree. I'm so happy that we're in this world together. And I really wanted to have you on the show. Last week, we had beautiful Tamu Mosley came on and was talking about holistic lifestyles. And she talked, and within that, there was this understanding that there's the food component, there's connecting with your spirit, and there's connecting with your emotions. And I know something that you have been on in your life and in your journey is kind of connecting to emotions and how we can let go of emotions that might put us in a space where we're blocked in our life. And before we kind of talk about who you are, what you really kind of get into and what you do on the show, I kind of like people to drop into the story. And I know that something that you shared with me when I met you was that you actually worked in corporate for many years and had a whole journey of kind of going through corporate that then shifted you towards opening up towards healing. And I'd love to hear kind of like, what is, if you could just give us a window into your story, just a little window. Yeah,
that's the fun bits, right, of this life, is the story. So I was working in Costco's nationwide. I worked for Costco and for road shows, and I was that A-type personality, always in leadership roles, always kind of like get her done. The whole time though, I remember there was a little secret, which is not such a secret anymore. A friend of mine that I'd work with, we would take rotating breaks, and we would end up taking longer breaks. I would end up taking yoga classes. I'd go and do yoga classes in between my work, because throughout my day, it was like 14-hour days, I would be exhausted. I'd find myself cranky. I would be explosive. And I'm like, something feels off. And I would go do yoga for 1 to 2 hours a day. And I'm like, oh my God, I love the world. I was a completely different person. And I recognize the fact that there is more to life. Like yoga is that first step for me that took me into the question that set me on the quest, which is, why am I here? Why am I born? Like, there's more to life than just following rules and getting tasks done that somebody else has told me to do. I know that in the leadership mindset that I have, there's much greater things that need to be accomplished with that. And this is just a great training period for me to take to the next step. So that was a little bit about that. And then I went on to, when I decided I was going to leave corporate, it was actually it occurred to me after 6 days of meditating in Thailand by this beautiful stream on an organic farm in the middle of nowhere. Nobody spoke English out there. And it just hit me that, okay, I need to actually start teaching yoga. I need to quit my job, and I just need to free fall into the surrender experiment. And surprisingly enough, I actually was reading the book Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer at that time, which just validated everything that I was feeling within me. So at that point, I came home from my trip and I was like, I'm quitting my job. I'm going to get certified in teaching yoga. And now I'm going to plan, which is I'm going to go to India. I'm going to face all my challenges that I've experienced from my family and my, living situations out there. I'm going to go save the world. And it was like, none of that other planning was supposed to happen. I recognize now that all of the learning that I had done up until that point needed to be unlearned to be able to step into this new path, and this new path of surrender, just knowing that it's the first step that I need to feel into so I can figure out what the next step is, whether it's forward, backward, or sideways. And that had to come from allowing myself to be more fully expressed in my truth, to know those subtle sensations within my body, within my gut. Like, there's just these little subtle communications. And as it always happens, I can always guarantee you, whenever I speak to Adorable, I get goosebumps, and I'm getting my goosebumps again. I call them God bumps or truth bumps. So yeah, that's, without going into, there's a lot more to my story, but that's a little shorter version.
Well, I mean, I feel like so many people out there listening can resonate, and just, there's a way in which we thought we were on a path in our career, and we thought we were going in a certain direction. And then there's us connecting to this higher power and surrendering to this higher power, and surrendering to a new path, and surrendering to what the unknown in a way. And I mean, on this show last year in 2019, folks who have been listening, my OGs out there, I consistently have been talking about these planetary transits that are really having people face the truth about what they do for money, and really face the truth about that's being tested, and like, is that really aligning with who you are right now versus what you were told you had to be. And so I think what you're, when you speak into your story, and you're speaking to this transition, and going back to the land, going back to your heritage, going back to connecting to the truth of who you are, I think people are like, have listened to the show, either have done that, in the process of doing that, curious about that. I know something that you mentioned, and something that I know from like looking over your bio is that, your journey has been, is one that's kind of, what I'm hearing is like, you're going into these modalities like yoga, and you're going into these modalities like emotional freedom, emotional release. And it's like, it's almost like there's an opportunity for you to do that inner work on yourself, while also connecting with people and kind of letting people be a part of your healing journey simultaneously. Is that kind of what you've been noticing on your journey?
That was my number one lesson out of all of it. As I said, I wanted to go out there and save the world. This was like my mindset. And in the end, everything keeps coming back to, what do I need? How can I support myself? How can I trust myself unconditionally when everything else seems like it's falling apart? To just know that I'm being guided. I don't need to know the next answer. I can always figure it out, as long as I'm staying in touch with my needs. And so I, just a little side note, which also plays into this, is I look at my body as like my child. It's like my spirit and my body are living in union with one another, and we need to both understand how, especially how the body speaks, because the body doesn't speak the same language. And so that was that's where everything that I do, no matter what I'm doing to go and help the world, it has to start from within, and from that space of ascension, because ascension is rising from one place. It's not spreading yourself out like that and reaching. You're rising up, and from that, I have to know those subtle communications with my body and my spirit on how to continue to rise up so that that light just shines on others, which impacts their bubble and the next person's bubble. And it's just a ripple effect versus leaning forward. You know, like a tree stump is straight up and down, and that's how it can provide its fruit. But if it's leaning forward, it's going to have no moment, it's going to have no stability. So it all comes back to like, who am I at the end of the day? And through that, other people get impacted without actually trying.
Yeah, I mean, I think in what you're speaking to is something that I've spoken to on the show about, which is like kind of, and like something that yoga does as well, is it promotes having a really firm foundation.
Mm-hmm.
It promotes, and within that foundation, and I want to, people are kind of like, well, tell us what she does. So I mean, and within that foundation, we can begin to kind of ground ourselves to be able to do that bigger healing work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of going to go there. Like, what is an emotional release facilitator? Like, what does that mean?
Well, through my own experience with my own body and trying to understand how she ticks, I have explored all kinds of different modalities, from yoga, aerial yoga, yoga nidra, kundalini yoga, breath work, which is the 2-part breath work, the clarity breath work, and I've tapped into a little bit of the holotropic breath work community as well, which it's slightly different, but the basically circular breathing. All of these modalities, along with many other tools that I use as well, and my instincts that I have kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of tried to work, I'm losing my words right now. Basically, I've just strengthened my instincts to understand where it lies in your body, especially if it's an in-person session. I can feel where things are because I have a background with Reiki and other kinds of spiritual healings. So with those tools, I kind of have been able to create programs for various people, including nutrition through like Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine influences. I've been able to figure out ways to get people to release that old stagnant energy or emotions that need to be in motion, to be able to find clarity on the other side of it, to find expansiveness, to find love, to reconnect with your truest self outside of the story that we've kind of packed into this vessel that clouds us sometimes. Does that make sense? A little too esoteric there?
No, I think, people are at different places on their journey as they're listening in. And I think, what you're speaking to is the fact that as human beings, we have multiple layers to us. We have a physical body, we have a mental body, we have an emotional body, and a spiritual body, a etheric body. And what you're speaking to is that you've taken time upon your journey to do deep healing work upon yourself. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of harnessed skills around being able to sense the emotional body of others, yeah, and to be able to help them release stuck emotions that are invisible, emotions, aka trauma, like aka trapped trauma that's in our emotional body. Yes. I think that like that work that you're speaking to is very interesting, because I think if we were to kind of think back to like when we were first talking about your journey of being in corporate, and a lot of people who have been, I guess, putting a lot of their life force into their careers, mm-hmm. I just think it's fascinating, the shifting that's taking place, mm-hmm. where we're having people who are, we're going to kind of like, I guess, be transitioning into kind of talking about a little bit more so like what we're seeing right now, where everyone was kind of outward, and the kind of the emotional day-to-day kind of inward qualities were not something that was on the mainstream focus. Like our like emotional well-being, mental health has been something that people have been talking about for a while. Yeah. But mostly people have been have been focusing on kind of just like their external circumstances. And
Yeah.
so I think it's interesting and fascinating that what you're speaking to is just this other way of knowing ourselves that's not mainstream.
Mm.
And therefore, um, in these times, you know, how do we kind of think about maybe these parts of ourselves that when we, you know, before we were in lockdown, maybe parts of ourselves that we weren't really so connected with. And so, because like corporations have shut down, like, so there's like a lot of people who aren't working right now, and they're left to kind of be with something that's a little bit more than how they identify themselves physically with their work.
Yeah.
Now there's like other ways of which they can identify themselves. And so I'm curious about how do we identify when we, you know, you kind of talked about what an emotional release is, and we can go more deeper into it, but like, how do we identify when it's time to go there? Like when we need to let go of an emotion? Like what are some things that let us know?
Well, I think every person's body's communication is going to be different. Every person's mind has a different strength to their reality, because some people's minds have kind of really controlled the path up until this point. So for me, it was this feeling in me. So I get communicated with differently. We all have different ways that resonate for us. So for me, it was like this stuck kind of feeling. I recognized the fact that I didn't feel happy. I felt like something was missing. I was more reactive. You know, I wasn't feeling like this feels meaningful. There was something more that felt like it was missing in my life. So it might show up differently for somebody else. But a lot of times I hear so many people experience relationships that have felt dead for a long time. They've been in jobs that they're like, why am I in this? I don't like what I do, but I need to do it because X, Y, and Z, you know, the children, the bills, the benefits. That was one of the things actually when I left working at Costco. Everyone's like, I could never do that, but I'm so glad you're getting out right now. Nothing against Costco. I love Costco. It's just that corporate mindset, that corporate life. And how this ties into what you're talking about is I would have these conversations with my body. So I would step out of my logical brain, which is the one that wants to kind of dictate everything and tell me the reasons and the logic and all the blah, 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 blah. And I would just be quiet for a moment. And I would hold that part that feels tense and feels uncomfortable, feels tight. And I'd just say, what's happening, love? What do you need? And I'll close my eyes and I'll wait. And sometimes it shows up in an emotion, like a little burst of tears, and I allow myself that. Sometimes it needs to be expressed in a scream. And sometimes just witnessing that feeling, that tension, it allows it to dissipate. So beyond that, if we don't give ourselves those little moments to connect within, it doesn't open up the opportunity for us to see what's on the other side, to see what's beyond the limiting thoughts. Because as I know it, my logical brain can only perceive what's within this little box that it's been taught, whether it's through other people, life experiences, or, you know, it's not something that's beyond what I've ever seen. Where that comes from is my right hemisphere of my brain, which is more expansive. And if I shut off that nonstop talking, I can see the opportunities that may be showing up all around me. But because I'm in this tunnel vision, I'm not able to witness them because I'm just like, I need this goal only, you know? So stepping back, feeling into the moment, feeling into my instincts, those subtle communications. Now it's like, okay, I can let go of that fear. I can let that fear just dissipate and I can see what's on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm. And as far as kind of like, I mean, you kind of went through a lot of different modalities that you work with. And you know, I'm the same way. I'm an energy healer too. I work with Reiki. I work with light work.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite interesting, you know, almost like an energy doctor. It's like, okay, take 2 prescriptions of this and tell me when you get back how it goes, you know? But if
Yeah.
you were to say, like, you know, as we kind of, I guess, as we pivot the conversation, you know, there was pre-COVID and then there's now. And I mean, really what I feel like is, like, for you being on the show, I think would be really valuable. And we kind of talked about this beforehand. It's like the new paradigm that we find ourselves in, and thinking about, you know, emotional release. It looks different probably now than it's did before. Some things are pretty much the same. I mean, there is the truth that, you know, I mean, I think you would agree, like, we, you know, COVID is showing us that we're connected.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think you would agree also that our emotional body isn't just our own, that there's the connection to other humans that we feel, and the pain of Mother Earth as well. So there's this kind of this lack of separation, so to speak, you know. And I keep going back to the word corporate, because I think what I'm really saying is Western. And I think there's a Western mindset that says that we're separate, and, you know, we're efficient if we focus on ourselves, and we focus on just making sure that X, Y, and Z is taken care of. And then we see this post COVID, and it's like, we're super connected. We have to take care of each other. We have to we have to distance from each other. But even in distancing, we're still taking care of each other and ourselves, and we're connected. And so I'm curious, like as you've been, you know, supporting your community as a healer, as you've been like holding it down, like what are you seeing around like the emotional release that people are that's coming up for people around this moment, and a lot of grief is coming up. And what are you noting in these times around like what needs to be healed and what needs to be let go of?
So there's quite a few things that I want to tap into. I would recognize it's a very uncomfortable time, especially for those who don't like the conversation that's going on in their own heads or within their homes, you know, the people they live with. But it's very much the same thing as what's going on in our heads. Sometimes if we don't like the voice that's in our head, it's very uncomfortable being alone. And we're separated, right? But then this beautiful world that we live in, like you just said, there's two different ways of asking ourselves and kind of being selfish in a way, with lack of better words, where selfish and selfless can be sometimes interconnected, because we can say that we want to go and help other people, and then we're not taking care of ourselves. But that can also be a selfish thing that's viewed, and because you're trying to get validation through an external circumstance. The other perspective is, I'm saying, well, I need to just take care of me and screw you guys, versus what I was saying, what do I need? And, you know, there's a difference between those two things of honoring ourselves, and then you forget about the other people. We have to find some balance between all of that. So it's like a loving connection to, what are my needs? How can I love myself more? How can I trust myself more? And how can I also give without giving up every part of me, or just giving that little bit that just feels like I'm just doing my part because I should be doing it. Now, there's a lot of different scenarios I just brought up all in one. And that's how, at this time, with an overabundance of information, I feel like it is so important for us to start tapping into, what do we see ourselves like when we step out of this? Like, there's no right one way to go about life at all. There's no manual to live in this body, nor how to do the right thing. We're in a completely new paradigm that nobody has ever experienced before. And I think right now is the most important time for us to get connected and rooted into our purpose. We're all born here, in my opinion, with a gift. And so how can we all contribute that gift as like a village, living with one another and supporting one another, but at the same time not losing yourself? So I compare this to a drug addict. Okay, so a drug addict will go into rehab, and then they get all their they get reoriented in the rehab. They get, they're able to kind of reprogram themselves in a way of how they're going to live life. But then when they step back into their old environment, they go back into their old habits. We're getting a gift right now to be able to basically have that rehab at home and to create new pathways now, new brain waves, new methods and processes of how we're going to handle our life. And everything keeps reminding me to bring it back to the self and how can I fill my cup so I'm feeding everybody with my overflow. But this is a time where we all are uniting together. And like you said, you know, we're really feeling the oneness right now. So I think it's so important that we step fully into our gifts. And I know so many powerful people out there right now, and they're scared to get in front of cameras and they're scared to speak publicly. And I'm like, it's not about you at this point. Get yourself out of your own egoic mind, thinking that it's about me. People care about what I look. I'm, you know, gaining weight right now. I think everybody just want to see me at this point. Nobody cares. Just get up and do something. And let's just go with that pull that's calling us to unite, to support, to love, to break down those barriers and say, we're all one in this. But that has to stem from something deeper. It can't just stem from this mind.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm just like, yes, like, I feel like I'm on the train, I'm on the Govindy train, like, I'm on it. And I know that, and it's nothing against anything that you just said, but I know that took years for you to get there.
Mm-hmm.
I know it took you years. I know it took
years.
Blood, sweat, and tears, years, crying, yelling, all the things. It took all the things. And you're still on your journey. There's still more things to be uncovered, clearly, as we all are. You know, I'm no expert either. I'm still on my journey. And I know that there are people who are hearing this but they're hearing you at a certain level, maybe that is like, okay, like, but I'm still with my trauma. I still have these emotional blocks. And like, you know, like I could just share a little, like, on my journey of healing too. Like, emotional blocks looks like me wanting to pick up the baton, wanting to press play on that button, wanting to write that blog, change my job, go after dating someone, wanting to be vulnerable, but feeling invisibly imprisoned, feeling depressed, feeling anxiety, feeling filled with anxiety, feeling like I don't want to go outside. I mean, not that I can really go outside that much these days, but when I could go outside, not being able to. That has been my past, and it's been something that I've been working on over the years. And that's where some people are. Like, it's just like they're in a tough place with their emotions, and there's this it feels like an invisible prison.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we kind of like take away the stigma behind these kind of deeper rooted emotional challenges like depression and anxiety that can hold you hostage, you know, it can kind of hold you back from where you're talking about, where we want to go, that promised land you're talking about. Like, where what if we have someone, where do we, and even myself, like, I would love to learn more about, from different healers, how do we help support our community in releasing those patterns within themselves that hold them back from what you're speaking to, which is like empowerment. You know, we have empowerment over here, we have blocks and trauma over here, and kind of what is this bridge that walks us over to that place, in your opinion?
So I can speak from, let me start with self first, because I know you brought in community afterwards. But with the self, what I do know is what we resist persists. If we resist our situation, we're working against that force instead of allowing the natural flow to unfold. So if I keep saying, I don't want to be in this, I don't want to be in this, I don't want to be this, my focus, my meditation is what I don't want. So if you just say, I accept this, it is what it is. Like, this is my life. Now, how can I find the opportunity in this? You start to kind of, that's where the reprogramming begins. So you might be in an old argument with the same person over the same thing. I'll give you an example. So in my life with my family, I would always go back to India and feel like there was judgment. I would always feel like I'm this black sheep. They want the women to be a certain type of way. And every time I would go, I would be faced with this defeat, like I'm not enough, like I don't fit in anywhere, not as an American, not as an Indian. I would feel just all of the world just caving in on me. And it felt like, especially with family, how do you get away from family? You can't. They're family no matter what. This time around, the last 2 trips that I went back, I was like, I'm just going to find my acceptance for what is. I'm going to love it exactly as it is and actually listen to, maybe they're trying to communicate something. For example, in India, they tell you what to do. They don't ask you. Here, they kind of tiptoe around things when they tell you things to do. But in India, they're like, no, just do this. And I would feel all this resistance. So I'm like, no, I can just accept it and say, this is the way they communicate. This is the way they live their lives. This is the way their relationships are, or maybe the way that our relationship is. And that's okay. And as soon as I accepted that, something was allowed to dissipate. And then from that point, my entire reality shifted. Everything became clear because I had nothing to push up against anymore. When you have something you're pushing up against, there's always a pushback. But if you just let go of that push, that's when beauty and love has room to grow. And this last trip, I was just overflowing with with love for and from the same people I felt resistance from for years. And it was because of my mind shift. I don't think my whole entire family and friends in India all of a sudden decided to jump on my bandwagon. It was me. I was the one common factor. So when it comes to the self, I think when we stop resisting what is, you hate your job, I hate it. Cool. It is what it is. If I'm going to stick with this job, I'm going to continue hating it. And that's the truth. Now I can observe what other opportunities are. Maybe somebody's talking to me about a job all of a sudden, and boom, I'm staying curious. I'm staying open. Curious is my favorite word. So if you start trying to find where you can plug in the dots, things will start to unfold and open up for you. In my opinion, in my experience, at least this is how it worked. And it's just one step at a time. You don't need to go dive headfirst into leaving your job if that doesn't feel safe for you. Just take one step into a little side opportunity, a little side gig. If you're not happy in your relationship, when you accept it, eventually it's just going to become unbearable and you're just going to gracefully step away instead of push away. There's, and then when it comes to community, I think through being the truest example of yourself and really honoring your needs and being the example that you want to see in the world is where you make a bigger impact than telling people what to do. And so that's the place where I'm coming from with all my videos and teachings that I do. It's, what do you think you need? What do you feel right now? You have your guidance within you. I don't have your answers for you. Nobody else does. You cannot Google it. You have to tap into your intuition and your inner guidance, but you have to let go of the resistance.
And I think, so interesting because a lot of different healers, when they say words like resistance and blocks, what it sounds like we're dealing with is some deep conditioning.
Yeah.
Some deep conditioning of what we were taught when we were young, things that happened to us throughout our life that were maybe shook us and took us away from that sense of security. Mm-hmm. And now more than ever, everyone keeps dubbing these times as uncertain times, right? Like everyone's caught in these uncertain, unprecedented times. And yet I can't help but think that beyond all of the other things that are going on with why people are saying we manifested COVID as a collective consciousness, like the spiritual ramifications behind why we have this in our lived experience is something around people actually desperately and deeply wanting to go inward. Mm-hmm. Feeling kind of really actually feeling overdone with that, the outward, feeling just overdid with the conditioning and with working, in America where we're filming this, we are known as the workaholic, one of the workaholic countries. And so a lot of externalization, a lot of I'm going to Google that, a lot of I'm going to look outside of myself. And I think for like the collective globally, I do believe that one of the spiritual manifestations of why we are seeing this is that human collective has been crying out for a break from that. They've been crying out for a timeout.
So
We've
true.
actually been wanting to be at home and to feel that energy of a mother's hug, because it's been like oppressive father, go to work, make this money. You know, it's been very like much, and it's building up all this energy of something that's not actually natural to human beings. Like, we're not naturally built. You know, we've been having all these industrial revolutions that have like pushed us into this place of just being like really work robot oriented.
Yeah.
And now it's gone. Like the economy stopped. Like, now what? You know, like now the emotions are here, and now we're here with this swirl. And kind of what you're speaking about is really important, that this emotional release that we have the opportunity to connect with is about kind of surrendering to what is.
Yeah.
And so what is right now is that we're in lockdown. People are in lockdown right now, and a lot of people are in a lot of fear and a lot of insecurity around money, and, you know, maybe like seeing too much of their spouses right now and their children, and like just all of this emotional energy is coming up. And like, I know you've been kind of speaking to very clearly like what to do with that energy, like where to go. And I'm curious, like, are there any other type of techniques that you've worked with that can allow people to move and transmute that energy? You spoke to just kind of checking in and saying how you're doing. Once you identified that you are triggered or that you have a lot of energy, once you've surrendered to that fact that you're like, wow, like I really feel a lot going on deep inside, what happens? Like, how do you get from one point of being, maybe you can't go away and cry or scream somewhere, like you're in the moment, you're with people, emotions are coming up, you're feeling triggered. How do I navigate not wanting to take my family out right now as we're just trying to eat some dinner, right? Like, how do I navigate? What do I do? I feel a lot of emotions. I want to let them go. What do I do with all of this?
Yeah, so if you can't allow yourself to release and scream or cry, or just step away to breathe, if you're in the moment, what I've experienced for myself, and I always speak for myself because, like I said, every person's different. I'll give you a story. One of my best friends and she has more of a masculine personality, and I have a little bit more of that feminine personality, more connected to my emotions, and she's more connected to her logical brain and very linear. And the way we would argue, it was like, she's very passionate about what she would say to me. And I would shell up because I'm like, I can't remember all the way back then. And I didn't know how to respond. So, but what I would recognize in those times where we get into these arguments is I would feel this buildup. So my body would go into kind of fight or flight mode, but more fight, where I would feel the prickles everywhere. My face would get hot. I would feel all this tension right here in my solar plexus. And what I started to do now through a meditation too that I practice is to separate myself from the energy of that. Because the energy needs to just be moved. If I can't actually move it, I can actually, my consciousness can take a back seat to listen to what's actually being said. And then from there, after really listening, is recognizing that it's not personal. So one of my biggest lessons that I've learned from any of the books that I've ever read, which was from the 4 Agreements, is don't take things personal. So there's many layers of that keeps unfolding for me. So when somebody is yelling at me, I can remove myself from the defensive energy that builds up and say, it's not personal. Let me just step back and listen to them almost like I'm a third person, hear them out. And now maybe I'm going to hear them from what they're really trying to say to me, instead of the limited intake that I'm getting through the shield of the defensiveness. And then from there, it's just, I don't know, I've recognized that mine and her relationship and our arguments have completely transformed since I started doing that.
And so it's kind of like you're letting yourself in becoming the observer. That's a form of letting it go, and it's not exacerbating the situation because you're not, I think something that you spoke to also in your bio is like, or something that we talked about, you talking about, is like this thing called of like our story, like the story of what we think is happening versus what may be happening. And it sounds like you don't let yourself walk into this pattern of going down this tunnel of a story you have about your friend, about her being masculine, you being feminine, and that like you kind of step away from that energy and just kind of let it play, like let it be separate from you, and in that it's able to kind of release from you and detach a little.
Yes. Yeah. And what I do recognize is, as I've been talking about the pathways or the patterns that we've created in our brain, as you mentioned, from childhood. So suppose my mother would say something to me and I perceived it as being abusive at that time. Now, a friend of mine, many, many years later, says those same words to me, they actually mean it completely different. Like how friends of mine will call me a bitch, and they just, am I allowed to say that word on here?
It'll probably be bleeped out.
Okay. They'll playfully call me the B word. And from one person, it can be very loving. And the other person, it can be like, oh my God, they just called me the B word. And so if I can actually step back from the patterns that I've created in my brain that tell me A is linked with B, and just say, maybe there's something completely different here, and just really listen to them. So I step away from that story. I can actually see them saying that, no, Z is equal to T, actually. That was completely different than what I was originally thinking. So it's good to take yourself to step back, to be the observer, as you said.
And I love that we're talking about that, because people are confined. And I know some of the transits that we're having specifically this week, we just have some hard aspects, some squaring with Mars this week. And whenever Mars squares, it promotes, it can promote violence, but it can just promote an intensity and magnify a molehill, so to speak. So I like how I can also incorporate the current astrology right now, in that right now this week is a really important week for us to just kind of cool our emotions and to have that separation that you're speaking to. This is a great week to kind of think about self-care. And so I would love to, just as we kind of transition towards the close of our show today, I'd love to hear just like some ways in which you care for your physical body, your mental body, your emotional body.
Well, mine is on a day-to-day basis. It's all throughout the day. Right now, actually, I have told myself that I'm going to set a proper morning routine, because I've never been a routine type of person. And I understand and I feel the value in having me time set aside first thing in the morning to really sit and meditate and not just jump straight onto my phone and go straight to work. So what I do and how I've been able to function this whole time is by doing I take moments throughout the day where, if I'm putting lotion on my body, I make my own body oils and face oils. So every time I'm putting it on my face, or even when I'm making it, I'm just telling myself, I love you. I'm just like nurturing my body as if it's my lover or my child. When I eat food, sometimes I forget to pray over my food. I'm not always the best at setting my intention before I eat. But I'll always catch myself in the middle and just say, I love you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And everything that I do, like even while I'm driving, I just take moments to just observe everything around me, like it's the last moment I'm ever going to experience it. So that's my day-to-day practices that I do. Besides, when I get into, I know I need to move my body. That's what keeps me sane. So that's another way that I give myself love. It's just getting into nature, moving, getting my heart rate up, connecting to my breath, and reminding myself how much I love myself and I know I got this. No matter what,
Mm.
I will never let myself down. I'll always have my own back. And with that, the universe supports that. It conspires in my favor because I believe it's so strong.
Ashe, aho, amen, a woman. A woman. I love you ending that on that note, because it feels very full circle. When we think about emotional release, we think about all of those things are just helping you to keep your emotional wellness, really your mental emotional wellness on a level that supports your life and supports your purpose. So thank you for sharing those things.
I want to add to that the most important time to send that love to yourself, and to really, for me, I'll speak for myself. I have to keep reminding myself to say this way. I really honor those times when I need to cry, when I feel weak, when I feel helpless, when I feel defeated. Those are the times where I need my own love the most, like where I need to say those things. I need to remember to be grateful for even the food if everything else is falling apart.
Yeah.
So when we just choose to shift the perspective, everything else seems to settle down and sort its way through. But it's a simple shift of perspective during those hard times to embrace what is, because this is a part of our human experience, especially those hard times. Otherwise, why are we living in this human experience if we're not experiencing the waves? So anyways, I had to add that. I never want to let go of that part too. It's so important.
It really is important. And I think a lot of people would agree that, we came to this planet to be here at this time. And we have everything we need inside of us to survive, and not just survive, thrive.
Yes.
And so I'm so happy for you just kind of sharing your beauty and your light and your strength, and kind of just helping us to take pause and remember the importance of our emotional selves. And thank you just for sharing your journey and your story, your personal story. If people wanted to just continue connecting with you, you're on Instagram?
I'm on Instagram at Govindi, Govindi, or you can find my website. I'm not sure if it's there was a little glitch with it. So if you cannot communicate with me through my website, find me on Instagram. But my website is govindijuneja.com. So GOVINDIJUNEJA.com.
Awesome.
And thank you so much, Adorable, for having me. I feel so blessed to have you in my life, and to continue on this work that we're doing to empower and uplift people. And you're just such a light. Every time I see you, every time I talk to you, my whole day shifts into something all the more great. So thank you for being a part of this time with all of us.
Thank you so much, Govindi. And I just want to say to everyone listening that if you are in this state of being where you are someone who feels like you're stepping into a higher calling to be a healer, to work with emotional release, to kind of connect with supporting this new chapter of being on this planet, I just invite you to just engage with us, engage with Govindi, engage with myself, add to this conversation. We need more beautiful, heart-centered healers, people who are supporting people through going through the process of elevating. And with that, we can elevate the world. So please reach out to Govindi. She gave you her information. I'm Adorable Earth Angel. That's who I am on IG. So reach out to us, send us questions, connect with us. We love you. And until next week, have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful day wherever you are on the planet. We love you.
Love you. Thank you.